Welcome to part 4 of our series of great chapters from the Old Testament. This series is a compilation of previous collections of daily devotionals that combine the Old and New Testament chapters. This series concerns itself with the Old Testament chapters. To say that some chapters are great and others not so great is not an accurate statement. As I've stated many times before, that every chapter is great in the Bible because it is inspired by God to be recorded and preserved for us down to today. Still, in an effort to encourage people to read the Bible, I have endeavored to choose some of the most well-known chapters as well as some that are quite not so well known. I read them and in just a few words add some devotional thoughts for that chapter. These combined together, the reading and the devotional thoughts, give us about 10 minutes for each devotional devoted to the chapter. Not enough time for it to be a pontification of great theological thoughts, but simply observations about that chapter. Our last class, we looked at 4 chapters from the Old Testament. We looked at Genesis chapter 32, Jacob wrestles with God. Genesis 37, Joseph's dreams. Genesis 50, Joseph buries Jacob. And Exodus 3, the burning bush. This lesson, we're going to look at 4 more great chapters. We'll look at Exodus chapter 20, the giving of the 10 commandments. Leviticus chapter 10, Nadab and Abihu. Numbers chapter 11, the Israelites murmur. And Deuteronomy chapter 6, Moses commands these to be taught. I hope that these will whet your appetite to look further into God's Word, to seek and to find truth. And now, let's get on with today's class. Welcome back to another in our series of the great chapters in the Bible. Our chapter today is Exodus chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20, the 10 Commandments. We'll begin reading in verse 1. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, to the 3rd and to the 4th generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son, or your daughter, your male servant, or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. Now when all the people saw the thunder and the flashes of lightning and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, the people were afraid and trembled. And they stood far off and said to Moses, You speak to us, and we will listen. But do not let God speak to us, lest we die. Moses said to the people, Do not fear, for God has come to test you, that the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin. The people stood far off, while Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. And the Lord said to Moses, Thus you shall say to the people of Israel, You have seen for yourselves that I have talked with you from heaven. You shall not make gods of silver to me with you. Nor shall you make for yourself gods of gold. An altar of earth you shall make for me, and the sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, your sheep and your oxen. In every place where I cause my name to be remembered, I will come to you and bless you. If you make me an altar of stone, you shall not build it of hewn stones, for if you wield your tool on it, you profane it. And you shall not go up by steps to my altar, that your nakedness be not exposed on it. As a boy, I loved baseball. I could spew names and facts and numbers with reckless abandon. I wasn't alone. Many a baseball fan could do the very same things. There were numbers that could be called out, and every fan knew what they meant, like 714, or 2,130, 511, or 60, 4,191, or 406. These and more had significant meaning. Now, for a Jewish child growing up, if you called out the number 603,550, they could tell you that it was the number of male Israelites 20 years and up that came out of Egypt under Moses. Or 613. That was the number of laws that an Israelite was required to keep. 12 would be the number of tribes. 10 will always be the commandments given to Moses on Mount Sinai. The 10 Commandments. So sacred were these words that God himself wrote them on the tablets. In fact, twice God had to do this because Moses broke the first set, having come down the mountain to discover the Israelites engaged in idolatrous ways. So rare was God's handwriting that only the tablets and Jesus himself writing on the dust in the New Testament are the only two times recorded that God wrote. And by the way, we aren't specifically told who wrote on that wall in Daniel 6, by the way. These tablets given to Moses were to be in the ark of the tabernacle. Later in Exodus 25:16 we read, "And you shall put into the ark the testimony that I will give you." The writer of the book of Hebrews confirms this in Hebrews 9:3-4. Behind the second curtain was the second section called the Most Holy Place, having the golden altar of incense and the Ark of the Covenant covered on all sides with gold, in which was a golden urn holding the manna, and Aaron's staff that budded, and the tablets of the covenant. I use a term from time to time referred to as the gestalt of something, meaning the whole is worth more than the sum of its parts. That is to say, individually, the parts of something have worth. Yet when seen as a whole, the value far exceeds what those parts are individually. I believe a valid case can be made for that which we have here in the 10 Commandments. Each law within the 10 is important. Yes, it's priceless. Still, the whole of the 10 together are beyond priceless, if that were possible. These 10 together sum up man's relationship to God and to his fellow man. From these 10 as the central focus, all other aspects of the law come forth. It is apparent as one looks at these, then, that they can be separated into two parts. The first 4 relate to God and the last 6 to man. That even this was evident in the way men saw them through the ages. Paul makes this statement in his letter to the Romans in Romans 13:8-10. "Owe no one anything except to love each other, for the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word. You shall love your neighbor as yourself." Love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. I'm pretty sure that's not what the people of Israel were thinking there at the foot of the mountain here in Exodus 20 about how much God loves them. For we read, "Now when all the people saw the thunder and the flashes of lightning and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, the people were afraid and trembled, and they stood far off, and said to Moses, 'You speak to us, and we will listen, but do not let God speak to us, lest we die.'" The writer of Hebrews also relates how fearsome that sight was in Hebrews 12:18-21. For you have not come to what may be touched, a blazing fire and darkness and gloom and a tempest, and the sound of a trumpet and a voice whose words made the hearers beg that no further messages be spoken to them. For they could not endure the order that was given. If even a beast touches the mountain, it shall be stoned. Indeed, so terrifying was the sight that Moses said, I tremble with fear. Still, love is at the heart of the Ten Commandments. A loving God gives his children rules not to make life hard, not to set expectations impossible to live up to, but to give them a full life. Far too often, rules and laws and regulations are viewed with contempt and disdain towards lawmakers and authorities. However, if you think living in a country filled with laws is hard, try living in a lawless one. In the same way, as a parent, can you imagine a household and family with no laws or expectations? Sadly, there are countries and families that exist under lawless or near lawless conditions. In the United States, even today, there are efforts to tear down and remove any reference to the Ten Commandments from public view. While the reasoning may be given as separation of church and state, one need not dig very deep to find at the heart is a rejection of God and his rule in the lives of people and nations. Although as a system of justification we are no longer bound by the law, still these Ten Commandments serve as a reminder that God has declared that there is right and wrong in the world. There is sin. These did not remedy sin, only identify it. Jesus did not come to die to remove rules and law, but to remedy that which the law could not do. In our next in the series of great chapters, we'll look at what Jesus identifies as the heart of several of the commandments in his Sermon on the Mount. Have you read that great sermon? Well, join us tomorrow, and let's take a look at that great chapter in the New Testament. Welcome back to another in our series of the great chapters of the Bible. Our chapter today is Leviticus chapter 10, the Old Testament, beginning in verse 1. Now Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, each took a censer and put fire in it and laid incense on it and offered unauthorized fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. And fire came out from before the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. Then Moses said to Aaron, This is what the Lord has said. Among those who are near me I will be sanctified, and before all the people I will be glorified. And Aaron held his peace. And Moses called Mishael and Elzaphan, the sons of Uzziel, the uncle of Aaron, and said to them, Come near, carry your brothers away from the front of the sanctuary and out of the camp. So they came near and carried them in their coats out of the camp, as Moses had said. And Moses said to Aaron and to Eleazar and Ithamar his sons, Do not let the hair of your heads hang loose, and do not tear your clothes, lest you die, and wrath come upon all the congregation. But let your brothers, the whole house of Israel, bewail the burning that the Lord has kindled. And do not go outside the entrance of the tent of meeting, lest you die, for the anointing oil of the Lord is upon you. And they did according to the word of Moses. And the Lord spoke to Aaron, saying, Drink no wine or strong drink, you or your sons with you, when you go into the tent of meeting, lest you die. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations. You are to distinguish between the holy and the common, and between the unclean and clean. And you are to teach the people of Israel all the statutes that the Lord has spoken to them by Moses. Moses spoke to Aaron and to Eleazar and Ithamar, his surviving sons, Take the grain offering that is left of the Lord's food offerings, and eat it unleavened beside the altar, for it is most holy. You shall eat it in a holy place, because it is your due and your sons' due from the Lord's food offerings, for so I am commanded. But the breast that is waved and the thigh that is contributed, you shall eat in a clean place, you and your sons and your daughters with you, for they are given as your due and your sons' due, from the sacrifices of the peace offerings of the people of Israel. The thigh that is contributed and the breast that is waved they shall bring with the food offerings of the fat pieces to wave for a wave offering before the Lord. And it shall be yours and your sons with you as a due forever, as the Lord has commanded. Now Moses diligently inquired about the goat of the sin offering, and behold, it was burned up. And he was angry with Eleazar and Ithamar, the surviving sons of Aaron, saying, Why have you not eaten the sin offering in the place of the sanctuary, since it is a thing most holy, and has been given to you that you may bear the iniquity of the congregation, to make atonement for them before the Lord? Behold, its blood was not brought into the inner part of the sanctuary. You certainly ought to have eaten it in the sanctuary, as I commanded. And Aaron said to Moses, Behold, today they have offered their sin offering and their burnt offering before the Lord, and yet such things as these have happened to me. If I had eaten the sin offering today, would the Lord have approved? And when Moses heard that, he approved. I have taken an interest over the years in effective styles of leadership. You can find these described in many places. The supportive leader, the coaching leader, the delegating leader, the directing leader. Some leaders are autocratic, my way or the highway type, and some are at the other end, the laid back and passive, the laissez-faire style. For those who study these styles, it is important for the leaders to know their style, and it is also imperative for those following to know it as well. Then there are expectations of what is to be done. One may not always like working under those conditions, but they know what to do and what they're in for. Would you care to take a guess as to what kind of leadership style God exercises? That's right, autocratic. As God, he has the right to make the rules and enforce the rules. There are naturally some who would vehemently disagree with this. Let's look at a couple of verses from the New Testament. As Jesus tells the parable of the laborers in the vineyard and how the owner's choice of how to pay the laborers. The owner says in Matthew chapter 20, verse 15, Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or do you begrudge my generosity? Similarly, in the parable of the talents, the servant who had been given 1 talent, for fear of his master, who was a hard man, hid his talent. The master does not let the servant off the hook, so to speak, because he knew he was a hard man, but tells him because he knew this, he should have invested so as to give a return. After all, the talent belonged to the master. Is God unfair in demanding such things? In our chapter today, we find Nadab and Abihu offering unauthorized fire before the Lord. As a result, they are consumed by fire that came out of heaven. Pretty severe, you have to admit. Was the consequence equivalent to the transgression? Some might think so, but there are some things to consider here. Had God really been specific enough about what was and wasn't acceptable? Well, let's see what God said. In Exodus chapter 30 and verse 9, you shall not offer unauthorized incense on it, or a burnt offering, or a grain offering, and you shall not pour a drink offering on it. Perhaps Nadab and Abihu didn't think it was important. Perhaps there were a host of reasons why they chose to do what they did. But it was not for the lack of what God had commanded. Jesus would say in the New Testament, in Luke chapter 12, verses 47 through 48, And that servant who knew his master's will, but did not get ready or act according to his will receive a severe beating. But the one who did not know and did what deserved a beating will receive a light beating. Everyone to whom much was given, of him much will be required. And from him to whom they entrusted much, they will demand more. This is hardly a New Testament teaching, for it is a natural understanding among men. And that is precisely why Jesus uses it as an example. Nadab and Abihu had been entrusted with the honor and privilege of serving the Lord, and should have taken that duty seriously with all reverence and awe. For so it was declared from the very beginning of the giving of the law at Sinai. In Exodus chapter 19 and verse 22, we read, Also, let the priests who come near to the Lord consecrate themselves, lest the Lord break out against them. And again in Exodus 28, 40 and 41, for Aaron's sons you shall make coats and sashes and caps. You shall make them for glory and beauty. And you shall put them on Aaron your brother and on his sons with him, and shall anoint them and ordain them and consecrate them, that they may serve me as priests. Moses has the difficult task of relating the reason God has rejected Nadab and Abihu. In verse 3, and Moses said to Aaron, this is what the Lord has said, among those who are near me I will be sanctified, and before all people I will be glorified. And Aaron held his peace. Moses himself will learn a very hard lesson about obedience to the exact words of the Lord. In Numbers chapter 20 and verse 8, he is told, take the staff and assemble the congregation, you and Aaron your brother, and tell the rock before their eyes to yield its water. So you shall bring water out of the rock for them and give drink to the congregation and their cattle. Then we read in Numbers chapter 20, verses 11 and 12, and Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock with his staff twice, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank and their livestock. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe in me, to uphold me as holy in the eyes of the people of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given them. God will not always deal so severely with individuals, but there are instances that make us aware of what Jesus said. Everyone to whom much was given, of him much will be required, and for him to whom they entrusted much, they will demand the more. Luke 12:48. Achan would learn this in Joshua 7. The tribe of Benjamin would learn this in Judges 20. Eli in 1 Samuel chapter 2 and again in chapter 4. King Saul in 1 Samuel 15. David in 2 Samuel 12. Israel and Judah in 2 Kings. Is it any surprise when Ananias and Sapphira lie to the Holy Spirit in Acts 5 that they meet their end? In a most unusual way, God speaks directly to Aaron beginning in verse 8. What do you suppose is the reason that verse 9 is given? Drink no wine or strong drink, you or your sons with you, when you go into the tent of meeting, lest you die. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations. If we are given into reckoning coincidences in life, then we shall most assuredly miss the lesson that is intended to be learned here. Is it simply a coincidence that such an order and command should come on the heels of this divine punishment rendered to Nadab and Abihu? Is there indeed a lesson to be connected with the orders given to the parents of John the Baptist when they are told in Luke 1:15, for he will be great before the Lord, and he must not drink wine or strong drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even from his mother's womb? For such was the commands made for those who had made a vow as Nazirites as found in the law. In Numbers chapter 6, verses 2 and 3, speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when either a man or a woman makes a special vow, the vow of a Nazirite, to separate himself to the Lord, he shall separate himself from wine and strong drink. He shall drink no vinegar made from wine or strong drink, and shall not drink any juice of grapes or eat grapes, fresh or dried. One can go further into the Scriptures and see the connection that the Apostle Paul makes with the office of the shepherd of the New Testament. 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 2 and 3. Therefore, an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. Have the people of God not learned the lesson of the dangers of drunkenness and strong drink? How dearly that cost was to Nadab and Abihu and to their father Aaron. How dearly will always be the cost of intemperance in and out of the people of God. Is there a lesson for us in this chapter? And Lord willing, let's meet here again tomorrow and look at another of the great chapters of the Bible. Welcome back to another in our great chapters of the Bible. Our chapter today is Numbers chapter 11. The Israelites murmur and complain. Beginning in verse 1. And the people complained in the hearing of the Lord about their misfortunes. And when the Lord heard it, his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed some outlying parts of the camp. Then the people cried out to Moses, and Moses prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. So the name of that place was called Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burned among them. Now the rabble that was among them had a strong craving, and the people of Israel also wept again and said, Oh, that we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt that cost nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now our strength is dried up, and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at. Now the manna was like coriander seed, and its appearance was like that of bdellium. The people went about and gathered it, and ground it in handmills, or beat it in the mortars, and boiled it in pots, and made cakes of it. And the taste of it was like the taste of cakes baked with oil. When the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell with it. Moses heard the people weeping throughout their clans, every one at the door of his tent. And the anger of the Lord blazed hotly, and Moses was displeased. Moses said to the Lord, Why have you dealt ill with your servant? And why have I not found favor in your sight, that you lay the burden of all this people on me? Did I conceive all this people? Did I give them birth, that you should say to me, Carry them in your bosom, as a nurse carries a nursing child, to the land that you swore to give their fathers? Where am I to get meat to give to all this people? For they weep before me and say, Give us meat that we may eat. I'm not able to carry all this people alone. The burden is too heavy for me. If you'll treat me like this, kill me at once, if I find favor in your sight, that I may not see my wretchedness. Then the Lord said to Moses, Gather for me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the elders of the people and officers over them, and bring them to the tent of meeting, and let them take their stand there with you. And I will come down and talk with you there. And I will take some of the Spirit that is on you and put it on them. And they shall bear the burden of the people with you, so that you may not bear it all yourself alone. And say to the people, Consecrate yourselves for tomorrow, and you shall eat meat. For you have wept in the hearing of the Lord, saying, Who will give us meat to eat? For it was better for us in Egypt. Therefore the Lord will give you meat, and you shall eat. You shall not eat just 1 day, or 2 days, or 5 days, or 10 days, or 20 days, but a whole month, until it comes out at your nostrils and becomes loathsome to you, because you have rejected the Lord who is among you, and have wept before him, saying, Why did we come out of Egypt? But Moses said, The people among whom I am number 600,000 on foot. And you have said, I will give them meat, that they may eat a whole month. Shall flocks and herds be slaughtered for them, and be enough for them? Or shall all the fish of the sea be gathered together for them, and be enough for them? And the Lord said to Moses, Is the Lord's hand shortened? Now you shall see whether my word will come true for you or not. So Moses went out and told the people the words of the Lord. And he gathered 70 men of the elders of the people, and placed them around the tent. Then the Lord came down in the cloud and spoke to him, and took some of the Spirit that was on him, and put it on the 70 elders. And as soon as the Spirit rested on them, they prophesied, but they did not continue doing it. Now 2 men remained in the camp, one named Eldad, and the other Medad, and the Spirit rested on them. They were among those registered, but they had not gone out to the tent, so they prophesied in the camp. And a young man ran and told Moses, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. And Joshua, the son of Nun, the assistant of Moses from his youth, said, My lord, Moses, stop them. But Moses said to him, Are you jealous for my sake? Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, that the Lord would put his Spirit on them. And Moses and the elders of Israel returned to the camp. Then a wind from the Lord sprang up, and it brought quail from the sea, and let them fall beside the camp, about a day's journey on this side, and a day's journey on the other side, around the camp, and about 2 cubits above the ground. And the people rose all that day and all night and all the next day and gathered the quail. Those who gathered least gathered 10 homers, and they spread them out for themselves all around the camp. While the meat was yet between their teeth, before it was consumed, the anger of the Lord was kindled against the people, and the Lord struck down the people with a very great plague. Therefore the name of that place was called Kibroth Hattaavah, because they buried the people who had the craving. From Kibroth Hattaavah the people journeyed to Hazeroth, and they remained at Hazeroth. Dale Carnegie said, "Don't criticize, condemn, or complain." Zig Ziglar said, "Have an attitude of gratitude, and you will have more to be grateful for. Have a complaining spirit, and you will attract more to complain about." Or how about Napoleon Hill? "When life gives you lemons, make lemonade and sell it to all those who get thirsty from complaining." Those are 3 quotes from 3 of the most well-known motivational speakers of the 20th century. I can rattle off many more quotes on complaining and its effects. It seems that we have come to the conclusion by relatively intelligent people who speak to the masses that negative thinking is fruitless and that gratefulness is a win-win situation. So why are people still complaining? Well, bear with me, and I'd like to spend the next 5 minutes or so complaining about it. If you sit down and talk to leaders and ask them what the most trying aspects of their work, you might find a common thread woven in among their answers. It's not always the challenge of the economy or money problems or marketing the product, whatever it might be, or the problem solving in it. You'll likely find that it is the negative people and the complaining within the company. That will wear them down as fast as anything that challenges them. One author calls it stinkin' thinking. Oh yeah, and back to those things to complain about. Number 1. Nope. Stop right there. In this world of the wonderful, fabulous, incredible blessings, they far outnumber the petty things we might choose to derail our grateful praise. So we're going to end this little rant before it begins. For a moment, put yourself in Moses' place, leading the children of Israel. Sure, you've spent 40 years herding stubborn, stupid, simple-minded sheep. Did it prepare you for this? Well, you'd think so. You've proved over and over that God is in control and that you might think that that would be convincing to the people. But it isn't. You have a people that were freed from bondage and oppressive slavery, and as a bonus, they gave you their riches as you were leaving the land. That would surely seal the deal. Nope, and nope. They just keep complaining, wearing you down. God gives them water to drink in a dry land. He gives them manna to eat. And still they murmur and complain. Now they wish they were back in Egypt. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt. It cost us nothing. The cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. Now our own strength is dried up, and there's nothing at all but this manna to look at. Moses can't help but take it personally. After all, he went before their leaders and convinced them to leave Egypt. When Moses can take it no more, he takes it to the Lord. Verses 11-12 we read, "Why have you dealt ill with your servant? And why have I not found favor in your sight that you lay the burden of all this people on me? Did I conceive this people? Did I give them birth that you should say to me, carry them in your bosom as a nurse carries a nursing child to the land that you swore to give their fathers?" The Lord hears Moses' complaint and decides that others can share his burden and takes the spear from Moses and spreads it among 70 others. Joshua, perhaps jealous that others were sharing in what Moses had, begs Moses to stop them. Moses makes a statement that many a leader wishes for those who lack the vision to see beyond the momentary troubles that surround them. Are you jealous for my sake? He told him. Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, that the Lord would put his Spirit on them. That would make a leader's walk so much easier if those under them could catch the vision, so to speak. Over and over, we'll see the Israelites engage in stinking thinking, complaining about water, food, meat, leadership, the long journey. They will constantly challenge Moses. But in reality, they're putting God to the test. But God had told them in Deuteronomy 6:16, "You shall not put the Lord your God to the test, as you tested him at Massah." The writer of Hebrews reminds us of that very thing in Hebrews 3, verses 7 and 8. Therefore, as the Holy Spirit says, "Today if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion, on the day of testing in the wilderness." Oh, and that list of complaints I was going to tell you about. Have you got time for that? No? How about some gratefulness? Now that's the Spirit. And Lord willing, let's meet here again tomorrow for another amazing chapter in the Bible. Welcome back to another in our series of great chapters in the Bible. Our chapter today comes from the Old Testament book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 6. Moses commands these to be taught, beginning in verse 1. "Now this is the commandment, the statutes and the rules that the Lord your God commanded me to teach you, that you may do them in the land to which you are going over, to possess it, that you may fear the Lord your God, you and your son and your son's son, by keeping all his statutes and his commandments, which I command you all the days of your life, and that your days may be long. Hear therefore, O Israel, and be careful to do them, that it may go well with you, and that you may multiply greatly, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has promised you in a land flowing with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets before your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. When the Lord your God brings you into the land that he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give you, with great and good cities that you did not build, and houses full of all good things that you did not fill, and cisterns that you did not dig, and vineyards and olive trees that you did not plant. And when you eat and are full, then take care lest you forget the Lord, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. It is the Lord your God you shall fear. Him you shall serve, and by his name you shall swear. You shall not go after other gods, the gods of the peoples who are around you. For the Lord your God in your midst is a jealous God, lest the anger of the Lord your God be kindled against you, and he destroy you from off the face of the earth. You shall not put the Lord your God to the test, as you tested him at Massah. You shall diligently keep the commandments of the Lord your God, and his testimonies, and his statutes, which he has commanded you. And you shall do what is right and good in the sight of the Lord, that it may go well with you, and that you may go in and take possession of the good land that the Lord swore to give to your fathers, by thrusting out all the enemies from before you, as the Lord has promised. When your son asks you in time to come, what is the meaning of these testimonies and the statutes and the rules that the Lord your God has commanded you? Then you shall say to your son, We were Pharaoh's slaves in Egypt, and the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. And the Lord showed signs and wonders, great and grievous, against Egypt and against Pharaoh and all his household before our eyes. And he brought us out from there, that he might bring us in and give us the land that he swore to give to our fathers. And the Lord commanded us to do all these statutes, to fear the Lord our God, for our good always, that he might preserve us alive, as we are this day. And it will be righteousness for us if we are careful to do all this commandment before the Lord our God, as he has commanded us. My father was a very deliberate traveler. He knew what the destination was and set his mind on it, and that was that. Usually our trips, no matter how long, were one day's journey. Some of those days were long days. We would travel 800 miles or more in one day. In his younger years, a trip from Michigan to Florida, some 1,200 miles, was a non-stop journey. It was a, here we are, and there's where I want to be attitude. And there's something to be said for that. In high school, my English teacher handed out a packet of papers outlining what we were going to learn that semester. She used a word I was unfamiliar with, a syllabus. It clearly laid out what she was going to teach. It took the mystery out of what her objectives were for the course. In reality, that's what good teachers do. They don't just randomly decide what they'll teach. There's an intentional direction and goal, an end in sight for the class. In our chapter today, the whole objective of what God desires Moses to do and expectations are for the people of Israel, clearly laid out what they are to do, how they are to do it, and even when they are to do it. As a bonus, they are given the results of following these instructions, that your days may be long, in verse 2, that it may go well with you, and that you may multiply greatly, in verse 3. Wow, that is really ingenious of God to give them all the answers to having a good life. He's taken the hard part of figuring it out and made it easy. Now, mind you, all of this is before they enter the land that he had swore to their fathers. Imagine, if you will, that you are looking for a new home to relocate to. You read the brochure that describes the place. Cities and infrastructures already there. Houses fully furnished. Wells and gardens attached. The price? Free. Too good to be true? It has to be the catch. All you have to do is agree to the terms of the contract and obey the laws. Would you move there? It's worth noting in the New Testament that this very passage in Deuteronomy 6 is quoted by Jesus in Matthew 22, 32 through 40. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. "Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?" And he said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets." Jesus, the Word, directly identifies the foundation of the law with these two commandments. And the first is that which you find in Deuteronomy 6:4. Jesus would quote this passage in another encounter with the scribe in Mark 12, when he asked which of the commandments was the most important of all. When Jesus answers with this verse from Deuteronomy 6 and also from Leviticus 19:18, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself," the scribe, in a moment of clarity, responds in Mark 12:32 through 34, "You are right, teacher. You have truly said that he is one and that there is no other besides him. And to love him with all the heart, with all the understanding, with all the strength, and to love one's neighbor as oneself is much more than all the burnt offerings and sacrifices." And when Jesus saw that he had answered wisely, he said to him, "You are not far from the kingdom of God." And after that, no one dared to ask him any more questions. Now, with the goal in mind of what they are to teach, Moses then proceeds to tell them how and when to teach it. But it's more than just rote memorization that Moses is after. This isn't a how much can you memorize or how fast can you learn these goal that he has in mind. Although the word used diligently here is akin to how one sharpens a piece of metal by repeatedly moving it over a whetstone. To put a fine edge on an instrument requires diligent and repeated friction over the stone. Notice that the lessons aren't just those taught in the religious setting of the tabernacle and temple, but those taught at home and in everyday activities. They weren't compartmentalized, but that which permeated the life. Everywhere one looked, there was the reminder of God's commandments. Yet in these was the love God extends and the love they returned to him. Notice then that it was the parents' responsibility to have an answer for their children in the future as to what the meaning of all this that has been commanded. It would be far too easy to simply follow as tradition and thus say, because God said so reasoning. But the true reasons lie in the experiences surrounding these testimonies and statutes and rules. If I were to stop and think about this, I might realize that there just might be a connection to this technique and the sharing of the Lord's Supper each first day of the week in remembrance of Christ in the bread and the cup. It's hard to forget something that you are constantly being reminded of. And have you been busy telling the old story, lest we forget? Lord willing, let's meet here again tomorrow and look at another of the great chapters in the Bible. And there you have it, another installment on our series on the great chapters of the Old Testament. I hope you have been edified and inspired to dive deeper into the study of the greatest of all books, the Bible. And I hope that you'll join us again as we shall look into more of the great chapters of the Old Testament. And may God richly bless you in your search for truth. Lord willing, we'll see you again next time.